Welcome to this week's Kindness Cafe podcast. Grab a cup of coffee, tea, or your favorite snack, relax, and join us for another uplifting story. I am Seema Raj, your host. Today, we're going to be discussing a huge issue that affects both men and women worldwide: domestic abuse. In the United States alone, about 20 people per minute are physically abused by their intimate partner. That is more than 10 million men and women per year. That means 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience violence by their partner, and out of that, more than 4,000 victims are killed per year due to domestic violence. It is so sad, and the numbers keep rising. And our guest today sadly knows what it feels like to be a victim of physical and emotional abuse for nearly 13 years. Welcome to Kindness Cafe, Caro. I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your painful journey with us. It is truly takes a very strong and confident person to be able to share their painful memories to help others.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, on your podcast. I'm deeply grateful to be here. And I'm also grateful that I'm in a place where I'm able to share because it really was a very eye-opening experience for me. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, as painful as it was. But that if we speak more and have more conversations about it, those who are going through it can have better options and manage it better than I have, for sure.
No, I really appreciate you coming out here. And I know there's hundreds of people out there that you're going to help after our podcast. First of all, I just want to ask you, can you tell our listeners what your profession is?
Yes, so I'm a fairy. I'm a hospitality fairy. I am a consultant. I basically advocate for congenial work environments in the food and hospitality spaces. I also do events, and right now my home base is Might End Restaurant in Washington, D.C.
Wow, that's amazing. I know you've come such a long way in your journey, but it is unbelievable. You suffered 13 long years of physical and mental abuse. I cannot even imagine, Caro, what your day to day life must have been. It's like walking on eggshells. No matter what you do, you just don't know what's going to happen. So, when and how did that abuse start in your life?
Oh, walking on eggshells is an understatement. How it started? Well, it's like what abusers do best. They groom you. And I was groomed for sure. It started off by recognizing my abuser when he came into my life. I was at a moment where I came from a very loving home, but sheltered. I come from a multicultural background and from the Caribbean, and I was at a place where I had just broken up with a long-term boyfriend. We were engaged, and I started questioning my relationships with people, where I was in life. I was incredibly vulnerable, and when I met my ex, it was a very great moment for him as an abuser, because he was able to influence me because I was highly impressionable, and grew me in such a way where I started alienating myself from all my loved ones in my circle that would keep me strong. The physical abuse didn't start happening until almost 3 years into the relationship.
Wow, I can't even imagine that. It must have been so hard. So you were with him for 3 years before the abuse started. So did it start slow? Like, what
Yes.
happened? Yeah.
It started off slowly, and I think, for me at least, that's why it was hard for me to acknowledge that I was in an abusive relationship. And, I don't know how it is for many other people who go through it, but I can see why people don't, why people on the surface or on the outside looking in, people look at those who are being abused as people who are in denial. But part of the denial stems from the grooming, from my belief. because they get into your head. And so then, and it's the same thing like with gaslighting, you start questioning everything, and you're not in a space where you're really able to have a completely level head. They keep you in a vulnerable state 24/7, emotional, physically, and mentally. So it started out very slowly, and then towards the end, it was very aggressive. It started escalating to like hostage situations, not being able to go into work. Really and truly, it was actually quite frightening.
I can only imagine, and just the hardest part is keeping it inside of you and not being able to really talk to anybody. And at this time, you had to face people because you were working in the hospitality industry. If you ever had a bruise or something, how did you hide this stuff from the people that you were working with?
Well, I hid it in a number of ways. I would um, just not be as social as I used to be. I would find ways where I wouldn't have to engage. So if friends would come and invite me to go out and have dinner or do things like that, I actually would, decline or say something was going on. I always had an excuse, that, always had a reason why I wouldn't be available for something. So in that regard, it started becoming pretty manageable because by then I had already been alienated by my family. It wasn't like it made it easier to hide, because the only times that I would see them maybe were for holidays, and those things, there's such small interaction. It would be very hard to detect that something was going on. And he was also quite smart. Like he would never really get me on my face. So, you can put any kind of clothes to cover up the scars or the bruises.
Was it ever so bad that you ever had to end up like in the hospital or anything or like a doctor's office?
Not well. I did have two black eyes, but I lied about it. I said that I had touched shellfish and rubbed my eyes, and I have a severe shellfish allergy. So, but it was really embarrassing. And I remember looking in the mirror like, wow. And I still found a way to rationalize what had happened. And, people were staring at me a little differently. And I had to be cool as a cucumber, like everything was fine. And that was really hard. That was really hard. But I think by that point, I had already been able to create disassociative thoughts from enduring the physical abuse. So, that's another thing that happens is that, the disassociative thoughts kick in very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's the scary part is these abusers, they act like they're the perfect boyfriend or husband, probably in public. So your friends and family probably never even suspected what was going on behind closed doors. How long did it take you to say enough is enough and you confided in either family or friends and you knew that you had to get out of this relationship?
Wow. It was towards the end. I mean, I was hitting like the 10-year mark when I started getting into those waters. Um, I just remember I was just very isolated. So no one really knew. And not only that, even my close friends, I didn't, because I knew that if I were to say something, then I would have to hold myself accountable because there's only so long someone's going to hear you say that you're tired, you're fed up, you want to leave, and then you don't do anything about it. So for me, I couldn't connect the dots fast enough. And even when I wanted to, there was always another incident that I was recovering from. And then when you're in hospitality, you're already depleted because you have to give so much of yourself to the staff or to the guests. So I was constantly in a state of doing my best to um, move in a forward direction in a lot of confusion and physical and mental pain and emotional. Um, and so with him, the straw that broke the camel's back, I can't say that there was one definitive moment, but I do remember just having a point where I would reflect on my life. I was doing a lot of self reflection. And the times, because he was also in the restaurant industry. So when he was at work, I would be at home, sometimes under the covers, just dreading him coming in, not knowing what was happening next. But I would quietly visualize. I had very strong visions like, God, if you give me a second chance, if I get through this situation alive, I knew as a kid that I wanted to live my best life, and this is not it. I want this kind of husband. I want this kind of relationship. This is what healthy. So I kept visualizing and building on a dream. And once I started once the dream started becoming more important than the fear of leaving was when there was a shift. But that's a lot of inner work to do that. And it takes a lot of time. So it was about 10 years, and I said, this is not working. And I said, the quality of our relationship is not where it needs to be. And there are things that I want to do with my life. I have dreams. I've got goals. And I said, I'm giving us one more year. And that's what I said to him. And that was almost like the kiss of death, because the abuse got worse. And not only did it get worse, but it made it harder for me to see past certain things and reach my dreams. So I got to a point where I started packing. I said, okay, I just have to do small actions with big impact. I can just start purging. So I started purging things that I didn't want to take with me into my new life. And I just started living in that reality in my mind, even in the worst of times. And I started visualizing what that would look like. And so our closets, it had a lot of clothes, and there were containers that we leave things for storage. Well, I started replacing whatever was in our storage in those containers with things that I was going to leave the relationship with. And the straw that broke the camel's back was it had escalated to such a bad point. I was in my 4th or 5th hostage situation. He was disrespectful to my mother, said something disrespectful about her. And I was like, enough is enough. I just didn't have any more fear of leaving. And I smacked him across the face because I was like, you will not disrespect my mother. And even though I had tolerated that in the past because I had been so conditioned and abused, he could see that there was a shift in me. And I think that's why the abuse also escalated at a much faster rate, because he started seeing I was having a sense of self-worth. And so I think it was to control through fear. He then choked me, and I was just recovering from asthmatic bronchitis, so I wasn't able to breathe for very long. And I remember having this distinct thought, like, I'm not going to die like this, but I might. And I said, but I'm going to fight. And so I did, and what I would do is just kind of lay like a dead fish so that he would stop his grip. And then he locked me in, stood by the door, and I was locked in a room. I couldn't even go to the bathroom for about 13 or 14 hours. And then I said, listen, I have to go to work soon. If I don't go to work, because he would steal from me, and I was the primary breadwinner because, he wasn't consistent as a restaurant employee at another place. And I said, well, you have to at least let me call out. If this is going to keep going, I have to at least call out. Otherwise, I'll lose my job, and, we lose health insurance and so on. So he let me call out, and I said I think I have asthmatic bronchitis still, like maybe the medication. I don't remember what I said. And so I got off work, and then the abuse just kept going. And he abused me for a solid 24 hours before he went to work. And in that moment, when he left, I watched him get on the bus, and I frantically packed some things in a bag, and I went to one of my sister's homes who lived out in Franconia, Springfield, Virginia area at the time. And I had to regroup. And after that, I decided that was it, that I wasn't staying around because I knew that I would be dead.
Wow, I just can't imagine that. I mean, seriously, we watch Lifetime movies. This is what they're made of. We see things like this all the time. And for someone like you, so young and vibrant, to have to really endure that from another person, I just can't believe. I'm so glad you got out of that and you had your sister and family support to help you. And so, did he ever stalk you after that, after you
He
left?
did. So a week after that incident, and mind you, that was like the fourth or fifth hostage situation, but the other times were like 5 hours, 7 hours, no more than 10. But already that was bizarre, and I don't know, I'm on the fence with saying too many details because um, it's, they're traumatizing in themselves. And I feel like as a society, we just see so many horrific things that people are becoming desensitized to stuff as well. And I don't want to do that either. But there was a point when the hostage situation started happening. I was already like, okay, this could be really tricky to get out and go to work. I was calling out a lot more than I normally would. And when I left a week after that incident, and he was at work, and I had just made friends with someone at this new job, and I was like, I need to get out. I don't know how I'm going to do it. She's like, listen, my brother has a truck. She lived in Annapolis. I was in Washington, D.C., and she borrowed her brother's truck, drove down to where my place was, and helped me move in the rain. And I moved straight to my parents' house, which I had wanted to do anyway. My father had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, and I wanted to be with him more and be with my mother. And I was more in a space where I could do that. And I would keep him on the phone saying I was going to meet him at work so that he wouldn't come home. So this person at the time, who I'd only known for less than a month, put her life at risk to help me get out. And I will never forget that. It was a lot of random acts of kindness. And once I got out, he stalked me for a little bit. But interestingly enough, the stalking did not really become severe until 2 years after I left.
Wow, probably.
Yeah.
Probably because he couldn't find another victim.
Couldn't find another victim.
Seriously.
But the other thing is, too, I think because he had such a grip on me, he was so
Exactly.
confident
Yes.
that at some point I would break. And I think after the 2-year mark, he realized that wasn't going to happen.
Yep.
And that's when it got really bad. And at the time, he sent like a threatening email. It was around the time when there was this football player that shot his girlfriend and then went to see his coaches and then shot himself in the head. I forgot who. It was back in December. I want to say like 2013, something like that. And he, at the time, at this point now, I was working full-time at a school as an assistant art teacher and working in the evenings as a maitre d' for a very high-end restaurant. And my days were crazy because I would spend that hour in between my jobs, 30 to 40 minutes, just driving from one part of town to the other to park and then change my clothes and keep going. So after teaching 175 kids, I would then take on like 100 guests in the evening. So it was a lot of energy exchange. So he was sending me this email, and then he started calling me at work. And because this restaurant was attached to a hotel, the call center, you can never see who it's coming from, so he can call as many times as he wants. And the calls were coming through to me, and he was like, you didn't read my emails? And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so finally I read the email, and he says, if you don't get back together with me to receive Allah's blessings, you can see how love can go wrong. And he sent the article of what happened that day. It wasn't until a friend I showed who was with me at the door, and she said, you don't know what happened? I was like, no, I was driving. Like, when do I have time to read the news in a 12, 14-hour day, So then she told me, and that's when, I'll never forget it, a group of CBS execs walked in. A world leader also walked in, And I just remember that part was like a movie where everything just slowed down and you don't hear anything, you don't see
Yeah.
anyone, because I just realized when I kept saying I'm not reading, I'm deleting and ignoring him, I added fuel to the fire. And I realized in that moment that he was actually threatening to kill me. And so then I went to the school where I was working. Never was on their website. The only way you knew that I worked at the school is because my name was outside of the classroom. But that was it. There were specific instructions. There was even a picture at the front door just to make sure that I wouldn't be followed there. And I was very careful about leaving a small print. And it was my art teacher. I call her my art mom. I call her Mama. She was just an angel. She is an angel and was an angel for me at that time. And she said, you need to go to the police. And so I went to the police and, had already had got it. And when I showed them the email, somehow I was able to just be persistent and explain more. And I was really scared because it looked like I was going to leave without a protective order. And someone above them, when he read it, he was like, listen, this is where you're going to go, this hospital. And on this floor, they have like a virtual hearing where you can meet with a judge. So then I go there and the judge gets on like Zoom or whatever. It wasn't Zoom, it was something else. And he said, based off of the messages that I'm seeing here, I do believe that your life is in imminent danger and I'm granting you a temporary protective order. But then I had to go through the courts to get a protective order, which only lasts for a year. It took 3 months before I could actually get a protective order, which meant I would have to leave school and teaching to go to the courts. And what people don't understand, the perspective and the lens from the victim is horrific. So you sit in a courtroom with the people who have the same date as you. Every whatever period that you have to come back to court, you're back at court with the same group of people. You have to hear the same traumatic experiences. You have to hear them begging for your life or their lives. I'm begging to get protection order for my life. I know everybody's story. They know mine. And my abuser would not show up in court, even though he would evade it somehow. And it would just be 3 hard months. And then going back to school like nothing was wrong, being present for these kids. What people don't understand what that's like, to have to integrate that into your life and the dedication it takes to get it. And then once you get it, you have to start all over again, pleading for your life, explaining to a judge why you need protection for another year. After I went through that for 1 year, I stopped, and I can see why, violence can still happen, because especially in DC, they make it almost impossible for you to get a protective order.
That's unbelievable. I mean, with all the cases that are on the rise all the time, and I know during COVID, domestic violence went up like anything. And so that really surprises me that, they would do that. But man, Carol, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, your story is remarkable, to say the least. It will really probably help so many people out there and give them the courage to stand up for themselves and put an end to the violence that may be going on in their life. If you had to say something to our listeners out there today about your journey and how they can get rid of this problem in their own lives, what would you tell them?
If I had one thing to say, that little voice that tells you that you can do it, listen to it. Listen to it and seek help. Seek help from your community. Take time to understand what kind of abuse your abuser, or what kind of abuser you have, because there's more information now than there was for my time, and women before, and women and men before me. Go to nonprofits. Like, for me, House of Ruth was a great resource. Whatever that House of Ruth is in your area, find one. It doesn't have to be House of Ruth, but there are a few really reputable organizations that do amazing work. They provide you with therapy, assistance, protection. and use that. If you don't have a strong enough community around you, find support from these organizations, because you can get the therapy that you need. You can get a better understanding on how to have a better way of leaving the relationship. I literally escaped. And that was not necessarily the best way to do it, but it was what I needed to do. And the longer you wait, the more you put yourself in the position of becoming a statistic. So get the help you need.
That is absolutely true and so right. And I do want to mention that there are many, many domestic violence hotlines out there in every state. You can reach out to any of them 24/7. They will help you because this is what they do. And what an amazing podcast, Carol. I am so inspired by listening to these stories like yours. And then you turn your life around and help others at the same time. I mean, this is a kindness journey because not only have you gone through this, but you are willing to help others. And that is kindness. If you can even help 10 people out there, you've done it. You know what I mean? And people out there, absolutely. And people out there that are listening to our podcast today, Caro's story does not end here. Tune in next time for part 2 of her inspiring journey as she goes through another big loss. She continues to stay strong and move forward in her life so that she can turn her own dreams finally into a reality. And she will also tell us her knight in shining armor, how he came through, helped her overcome her feelings of distrust and PTSD of getting into another relationship. So thanks again, Caro, for putting yourself out there, bearing your soul. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Seema. I'm very grateful. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to do so, to share. Thank you.
Of course. And with that, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. And make sure you do tune in next time for part 2 of Carol's journey. Until then, stay safe, healthy, and remember, living is giving.